We are ready.
Thank you all so much for being here today. We're so excited to officially launch the Latine and Chicano Historic Context Study. This is a collaborative effort between Boulder County, Parks and Open Space, Community Planning and Permitting, and our amazing consulting partners at Rooted Pathways Leadership. This study is about understanding and uplifting the stories, places, and experiences that have shaped Latine and Chicano life across Boulder County for generations. From agricultural labor and community gathering spaces to schools, neighborhoods, and family histories. This work seeks to document histories that have long been overlooked and underrepresented. Our goal is to ultimately build a fuller, more accurate picture of the past, guided by you, by community voices, and grounded in cultural stewardship. Your insights, memories, and perspectives are essential to this work, and we're really grateful to begin this process in partnership with all of you today.
During our time together, our team will be sharing a little bit of their stories while we introduce you to the project. If questions or thoughts come up for you along the way, feel free to write them down and you can ask them in the evaluation form at the end. We'll make sure to come back to them during the question and answer. Actually, we will go ahead. I messed up. That's okay. We're re-recording this. We'll get back to you on your questions and answers. And now Elizabeth will share her story on the project.
Next slide, please. When I think about where I come from and why this work specifically matters for me, I think first of my mother's kitchen in Puerto Rico. The walls are always warm, and it's not just because it's hot outside, but from the stove where arroz con gandules simmers, where sofrito can be smelled in every corner of my house, and the tostones are always waiting for me. A tiny radio plays salsa louder than it needs to be, while my mother, Nancy, sits and cooks. And you can see her pictured in the bottom left corner. And it's always my mom and my tias and my great grandmother that would tell stories, the kind that root you in who you are. And you can see my great grandmother at the top left picture. That's actually not even a picture of her, it's a painting because we don't have any pictures of her. And then my tia, Fela, is pictured in the middle bottom in the pink shorts. At the center of all the stories that the women in my family tell is ultimately the matriarch of our family, Doña Cayo. She's a force, the keeper of memory, the one who held our stories in her voice and her hands, despite the fact that she couldn't write. When she cooked, she wasn't just feeding us, she was feeding the generations that came before and after. She taught us that the land, the food, and stories, they're all connected. Outside of that kitchen is another really special place called El Yunque, which is a rainforest in Puerto Rico. I remember running in flip flops along the river trail, sometimes slipping, always falling, the cool water around my ankles, the hum of coquis, the frog in Puerto Rico, and then the mountain air wrapping around my shoulders. These memories, the kitchen, the rainforest, taught me that our connection to land is not only about labor or struggle, but it's also about joy, pride, family, and belonging. And for me, it's being a part of a legacy of women that have made me who I am. I am because we are. I am because there was so much struggle and joy in my family that came from those women that have allowed me to be where I am today. And that's why I do this work, because I know what it means for a place to hold our stories and what it means when those stories are ignored or erased. I know that families like mine, and maybe like yours too, deserve to have our stories and histories remembered with dignity, with love, and with the power that comes from saying, we've always been here. And before we dive into our project, I would love to welcome you first and give you sort of a note on language. So I want to take a moment to explain why we're using the terms Latine and Chicano. These are just a few words that many people in our community use to describe themselves, and we want our language to reflect that. We know people also use Latino, Latina, Latinx, Latine, Hispanic, Chicano, Chicana, Chicanx, Mexican American, and much more. And we want to be mindful of those identities. And so Latine is a gender inclusive form of that. We're also using Chicano because it has a very specific cultural and political history here in Colorado and the Southwest, especially tied to agricultural labor, activism, and families with longstanding roots in this region. So using that term honors the meaning it carries for many community members that we're working with and potentially with you. So overall, our approach to language is we follow how people self-identify and we let community voices guide the language that we use. So now I want to talk a little bit about our stories. For too long, the histories of Latinx and Chicano communities in Boulder County have been shaped by systems of power and privilege, especially the privilege of owning land versus the reality of working the land without being recognized, respected, or remembered. Many of our stories remain invisible, stories of labor and resilience, but also of joy, belonging, culture, and deep connections to place. Our community has experienced displacement, erasure, even as the landscapes we helped sustain became protected as open space. Yet for generations, people that have shaped Boulder County in the fields, neighborhoods, in churches and kitchens, and in the stories we pass down. Our histories have not been written into the archives. They have not been protected. Some may have even been forgotten, even as this community fed and built Boulder County into what it is today. This project is an opportunity to change that, to ensure that our children and their children know that we too matter, that we too have roots here, and that we too shaped Boulder County. So we're here to honor not only the hardships, right? The displacement, the loss, and the deep pain that comes with this, but also the joy and the pride. The memories of laughter in the field, celebrations after long days, the sounds of music and family that tie us to the land just as powerfully as labor ever did. So your stories here today, no matter how big or small, are essential. They deserve to be seen, heard, and preserved. We know sharing them can be emotional. We know it can hurt. And we want to honor that vulnerability with care. So I invite you to take a moment to reflect. And if you feel comfortable, please share your thoughts in the chat. What would it mean to you to bring the stories of your ancestors to light for future generations? What hope, what pride do you carry in the act of remembering? So some that I'm seeing, let's see, are, let me see if I can find it. Oh my goodness, I lost it. There we go. So some responses I'm seeing is our gente, our people, have been an asset in the fabric that has built Boulder County in many ways. They deserve to be recognized and the story should be told with pride. I totally agree, right? The work that many Latinx Chicano people put into building and feeding the folks that lived in Boulder shouldn't be forgotten. And it should be an essential part of the history of Boulder County. I see someone say, honoring them in this way keeps our stories to share with our children. Absolutely. I think it's really important to write down history now before elders pass away to make sure that students and kids and folks growing up in later generations will be able to remember the legacy of what built this county and this community. I see someone else say language. Schools, society robbed us from being bilingual. I think that this is a really poignant sort of comment because I think it points out the fact that many folks have lost their language. And a lot of that is due to assimilation, forced assimilation. And it's really difficult to reconnect with roots if that language is lost. But it doesn't mean that you can't reconnect with them. And so we welcome, stories in English and Spanish as well. And I'll go on to the next slide.
My business tagline is honoring our roots, growing our future. Those words in my logo, which is a tree, capture the heart of my vision for leadership and community. They are inspired by the village that raised me, the students who continue to inspire me, and the community that has embraced me. A tree begins as a seed, planting its roots firmly in the ground, drawing nourishment from its foundation, our history, our experiences, and our ancestors. Its trunk grows strong over time, shaped by its environment. It flourishes when supported and cared for, and it weathers hardship with the help of people and community who see us and stand with us. And then there are the leaves. The leaves are its voice. They whisper in the quiet moments and rustle loudly when the winds shift. They shine bright in seasons of growth and fall away at times of rest, only to return again, ready to be seen and heard. This project is the voice of the Latinx and Chicano community in Boulder County. You will shape the history that is told and honored today and in the future. For me, I grew up in the small town of Milliken, Colorado. It used to be rural. It's not so much anymore. My sister and I grew up next door to our grandparents, and their yard was the center of our world. And this picture you see here is actually a photo that our dad took of our grandparents, our grandma and grandpa Chavez. And you could see my backyard on the other side of the fence. But this is where we were always outside, playing, gathering with family and neighbors, and learning who we were, who we would become. As a young adult, their backyard became my happy place. And even now, when I close my eyes and I need to feel grounded, this is where I go. Hearing the leaves rustle in the wind. It is where my roots will always be. And in the top picture is Island Grove Park in Greeley, and it's where the Greeley Grays practice baseball evenings after long days of working in the beet fields. My grandpa Frank and his brothers and cousins played on the Hispanic semi-professional team and traveled across Colorado to play against other colonias. Many of the fields they played on were built by the teams themselves, a reminder of how our communities created joy, connection, and possibility out of very little. And then the last picture is of the Great Western Sugar Company in Longmont. And it was their recruitment efforts in New Mexico, Texas, and Mexico that brought so many families to Northern Colorado, including mine. Every time I drive by the building in Longmont, I am reminded that I am here today because of the strength, resilience, and love of my family and the communities that raised me. And speaking about community, I want to quickly introduce our project team. And so we have first, and you will learn about us a little bit as you've learned, seen, witnessed, that we're telling our stories. We're introducing ourselves through our stories and connection to place. So first we have Josie Martinez, who is a community leader, advocate, and organizer, and she's working with me in Rooted Pathways Leadership. And we have Dr. Nikki Gonzalez, who is the Vice Provost for Diversity and Inclusion and a history professor at Regis University. She is also the first Latina state historian. And then there is me, Dr. Chavez, and I am the owner and consultant of Rooted Pathways Leadership, which I started earlier this year. You may know me from my previous life of being at Front Range Community College. And then next, we wouldn't be here today without the amazing work that was already established by the Boulder County staff who are supporting this project. And we have Elizabeth Rios Brooks, who you've met. She is the Cultural Resource Program Coordinator for Parks and Open Space. And she's the one who was able to get Las Barracas on the Endangered Latinx Landmarks list. And she's the one who realized this project, and we are honored to be a part of it. Next, we have Jessica McKinnon, who is planner for historic preservation, for community planning and permitting, and she has been a wealth of information of answering all our questions and finding the foundational sources that our students are using for their projects. And then finally, we have Denise Grimm, who is the principal planner for historic preservation for community planning and permitting, and she has been a wonderful support for us. And now, Nikki will introduce you to our student research assistants.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Becky. And our team would not be complete without our young historians. So one of our goals with this project is not only to write the historical record, but also to mentor the next generation of public historians. We think it is our obligation and indeed a responsibility that we have. So we are working with 7 college students who have taken on tasks of researching specific sites. This means going through archival information, census data, and various secondary sources. And they're also helping with some of the outreach too. So I just want to give a shout out to the students who are involved in this project. Um, sorry. Vanessa Arumbula from CU Boulder, Marlena Nava Chorn from CU Boulder, Julia Eden, also from CU Boulder, Jenny Padilla from Metro State University, Nacy Hernandez Esqueda is one of mine from Regis University, Ceci Vasquez from CU Denver, and Astrid Villalobos from CU Denver. So we are so delighted to have all of you as part of the project. Here are a few comments from our student research assistants and their work on the project. For this, one student said, for this project, she's really enjoyed doing the promotion and outreach. She's never done historical work before, and that's okay because we are mentoring them, we're teaching them. And so it's been exciting to try something new and different side of storytelling. One of our students made a comment that she's had a really great time working on this project. As someone who grew up in Boulder County, it has meant a lot to her to learn more about the history here, and she's very thankful to be part of this. Another said it's been an incredible experience to learn more about the place that she's lived her whole life, especially the pieces of history that she never knew about. So these experiences have been very powerful for our students. So now I'll turn it over to Becky.
It's back to you.
Okay, back to me, and I'll talk a little bit about how we tell our history. So my favorite quote by James Baldwin is something he wrote in 1965, which talks about how we carry our history with us. And basically, in summary, he says we are basically all walking historical narratives, which is how I see the world too. And we are shaped by our histories in ways that we may never realize. We carry the spirits, the struggles, the triumphs, and the dreams of our ancestors and the lands that they lived on. And really, our historical, what we carry historically, shapes every way that we see the world as well. And so when we think about, how we pass our stories on, we pass them on through official archival records, which actually leave out so much of our history, which we are trying to uncover. Through the stories that we share, maybe around the dinner table or, on long car rides or trips to important places, and through the photos and items that are significant to us. So we will be using all of these in our research, including surveys that we will provide for you. But please, think about like pulling out those shoe boxes from the attic or from the closets that might contain photos and letters and, little pieces of history that you may never even have thought of. And the themes that we are already seeing emerge around our historical narratives include labor. I mean, obviously, we help build this state. Maybe labor unions that our family members have belonged to. Spirituality, and that doesn't mean just churches. It means a spiritual connection to land. And of course, land itself. Many of us sustained ourselves through gardens, through raising animals on properties and so forth. And also organizations that our families have historically belonged to, including political and civic organizations, the arts, okay, music and painting and theater, patriotism, migration and recreation. So those are the types of things that we're going to uncover. And I'll share a little bit. Becky and Elizabeth have shared beautiful pieces of their own family history. And this next slide shows you some photos from my family history. I do a lot of oral histories, and one Chicano activist that I interviewed told me, we tell our stories to make sense of our lives. And I think that very simple statement is very poignant. I think part of my entire life as a historian, and even as a kid who was a budding historian, I loved history since I was a little girl, has been dedicated to figuring out who I am and who my family history is, because I wasn't getting it in school. And so I had to find pieces of it in various places because some of it is very painful. My family has deep and complex Colorado roots. The border crossed most of my ancestors. My paternal grandfather was the most recent person to, he was the one to cross the border along with a relative from Italy. But these photos are snapshots of that history. So on the left is my paternal grandmother, Margaret Lujan, who grew up in Erie, so part of Boulder County, with her coal mining family. She then moved to Denver for opportunity during World War II, where she worked at Gates Rubber Company, producing goods for the war. She became a single mom, raising my dad and his two brothers in the Gloveville neighborhood where this photo was taken. On the upper corner, this is a fun one. My great aunt, Flora Sandoval, is pictured with her basketball team in 1921. So you think women didn't play sports in the 1920s? Well, they did. She grew up in Fort Lupton. Her father was actually the sheriff in Fort Lupton. And on the bottom right photo is also a fun one. And this is my great grandfather, Pio, who owned the pool hall in Walsenburg in southern Colorado. And here he is pictured with his three boys, one of which is my grandpa Albert in the middle. And that's my mom's dad. And my grandpa Albert played pool all his life. He lived to the age of 80, and he played pool until like literally the month before he passed away. And he would always win like a couple $100s a week. And my sisters and I, we usually would get like a few $20 bills along the way. So that's a little bit of snapshot of places and people that are significant to my own family story. So what is a historic context? So a lot of people don't know that term, but a historic context is a way to understand and tell the full story that is more place-based. It helps us to see how and why things happened. Our goal with this project is to uncover and then include the stories that have not been written or talked about publicly in the narrative of unincorporated Boulder County. As Elizabeth described in the beginning, our community has been left out of many of those traditional versions of that history. So now it is our time to uncover and to share those stories. It is important that places, memories, and experiences be documented so that future generations will know the contributions that we have made to the history of Boulder County. And so I'll say a little bit about place-based history, which is at the root of a historic context project. So place-based history helps us understand the where of our story. This refers to the places where our families and communities have lived, where they've worked, where they had fun, where they maybe had recreation, where they have raised their families and built their communities. Place-based history literally grounds us and our stories. And this is especially powerful with our community, who has often been tied to the land, whether it's through our own agricultural practices and gardens and raising animals, or also working the land, whether that's through mining or through agriculture or whatever. Our project will highlight those places where our stories took place, where our community lived, where we worked and traveled to for work. And you'll see that, like in many of our stories, our ancestors traveled from maybe it's mine to mine or field to field, wherever there was good work to support their families. It is also where we celebrated and gathered to connect with one another, to the land, and to, and through spiritual practices. One question to ask ourselves is, how did these important places change over time? What forces or migrations or economic shift caused these changes? Did places become more Latino over time? Did the force of racism cause Latinos to be left out of some of these places? So we want to pay attention to what shifts took place there. And once we ground ourselves, we can explore the stories that made those places so important to our families and communities. So now we have a Mentimeter question number 3. And the question that I just raised, people are responding to. And that is, how did these important places change over time, and what forces or migrations or economic shifts changed those places? And I'll just toggle over to the slide. So some participants talked about economic changes. One participant said Boulder County was a very agriculturally based, so there was a lot of agricultural labor, and those of us with roots in that area, have those historical memories. People spoke up, so it was, people took agency, and They spoke up for their rights, whether it's through unions, through civic organizations, or through the Chicano movement. The city of Boulder color has changed significantly over the past 2 decades as Boulder has embraced more multicultural communities and the need for service workers. So our community has been involved in that. Another participant said agriculture was very pronounced in the Longmont area and over time was practically eliminated. In 1970, when this person came to Boulder as, sorry, it's not showing the whole slide, as a CU migrant, and I can't read the rest of that slide. But others said, one participant said, my grandfather was a bracero, which meant that my mom and her siblings migrated between Mexico and Colorado. Some places have become less Chicano due to gentrification. I think we're seeing that all around the state. And one person mentioned assimilation. So many, many political changes have taken place. I'll turn it over to Elizabeth to talk to us about unincorporated Boulder County.
Thank you so much, Nikki. So what is unincorporated Boulder County and why is that relevant in this conversation? So what we are trying to explore are sort of finding the gems in history that have been covered for a long time. And there are 3 books related to Latina and Chicano history in Boulder County, and a lot of those are focused more in the city areas, more focused in the city of Boulder and city of Longmont, Lafayette, etc. And so a part of this work is uncovering the stories in unincorporated Boulder County. And so if you look at this map, that's sort of the white spaces. And what that means is the parts of the county that are not within the boundaries of any city or town, like Longmont, Lafayette, Louisville, or Boulder. These are governed directly by Boulder County rather than a municipal government. And so those white spaces that you see on the map often include rural and agricultural lands, small communities or clusters of homes, open spaces, farms, ranches, and older settlement areas. So in the context of this project, unincorporated Boulder County is important because many historic Latina and Chicano communities, labor housing sites, hunting, fishing, places where you could raise your own animals, growing your own food, and agricultural workplaces were located outside of those city limits, where county, not city, jurisdiction applies. So the lighter white that you see is what's included in our study and really where we want to ground our stories and places in. And so we just wanted to make sure to explain what that means for folks. And I'll pass it to Becky.
And this is a Google map that I created to show the communities in unincorporated Boulder County and the current designated historic sites that our student research assistants are looking at. I think it was important for me to be able to see where everything was, because oftentimes we're stuck in our silos of the towns and the cities that we frequent most often. And also to see how vast Boulder County actually is, because I forget sometimes. But as you can see, the unincorporated Boulder County towns and municipalities are Allens Park, Coal Ridge, Eldora Springs, Gold Hill, Gun Barrel, Hygiene, and Niwot. And then these are the sites that our students are looking at with the green flags are Las Barracas, Casa Vista, Longfellow Pace Farm, Sadi Farm, Gooding School, Altona Grange, Pleasant View Ridge School, and Larber Farms. We will continue to add the sites to this, and we will have a link available for you to be able to access it anytime to kind of take a peek into what we're doing. And so one thing that we did is we asked participants if they could share a memory about the places they meant that we talked about, or any place in unincorporated Boulder County that is important to them. And for a few of them is McIntosh Lake, the road to Jamestown, which is beautiful, the view of Boulder Valley that unfolds as you top the hill heading west on US 36. Tanaka Farms had shoddy places where farm workers lived. I visited many farm worker homes that didn't have running water and families living together. So those, we have the memories that spark joy, but we also have those memories that remind us that not everything was perfect and that we need to explore the good and the bad of history and the places and spaces. Um, we also had somebody who did their internship in 2007 with Colorado Legal Services with UNC, and they provided legal resources to all the farm workers in northeastern Colorado. I would visit all the migrant farm worker camps. And so that also goes to show, like Nikki talked about, of how our communities are so connected through the places and spaces and the work that our ancestors have done. And now I will pass it on to Josie.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here with us today and supporting our project. For me, my story is a little different in the aspect that my family I wasn't born here. We're immigrants. I was born in Tuxpan, Veracruz, Mexico, and we moved to the United States in 2000. So I was only 6 years old. My family moved here looking for a fresh start and a brighter future. And we settled in Longmont, Colorado ever since. Um, I always think of I always think of home, Tuxpan, Veracruz, and I wondered what it would have been like for our family if we stayed there. I experienced resilience firsthand with my mom. She became a single mom shortly after we arrived to the United States. So growing up, it was really rough because we were undocumented. So I remember that when 9/11 happened, a lot of the changes, or there were so many changes with, immigrants within the country. So it was harder for them or for us to work jobs, and my mom struggled a lot. But thanks to my mom and her sacrifices and the strength, we were able to live the American dream. So we were finally able to travel back home. I attended college, we bought a home, we became citizens. I remember the first time that I traveled back home after obtaining my green card was to say goodbye to the dearest person in my heart. And home has never been the same after that. And you can see my grandma, she is in the middle of the left. And my grandma's house was always a place for reunion, where there was always warm food on the table and brought us together. I come from a strong line of women, and I am proud to be the daughter and granddaughter of resilient women. There's a picture here where there's a bunch of flowers, and my grandma was very well known in the community. She was also an activist. She fought for women's rights primarily. She was a single mom herself as well, and she was just very resilient and always spoke up. She ran a funeral home, and she served like the less fortunate as well. If you didn't have money to give your family like a proper burial, she would do payment plans or even just sometimes like whatever they could give her in order for like their family members to have a proper funeral. And now my mom's doing the same. Her funeraria is called Funerales Cristo Rey, and it's named just like my grandma's funeral home. And then I met the love of my life in Longmont, and we have two beautiful children together. And my children are the biggest reason why I will never give up on our community. I will always remind them of our history and where we come from. And my children are my biggest motivators to doing this work because the color of their skin, they're brown, they have, Hispanic last names, or we're Mexican, we have Mexican last names. And I know that is one of the reasons why they will always be um, looked at within our community, especially our people that look different. So I'm very thankful to be here, and I hope that we continue to make a change in our community. So we're going to talk about the key areas of study. And we begin with sites we know, such as farms, mines, schools, and granges, but we look at them through the Latin and Chicano lens. Whose voices are we missing? Whose hands shape these places? Las Barracas is a central example of resilience and community. Many Mexican and Chicano families live there while working the fields. These barrack holds memories of struggle, pride, and community. And I think that's something that we really want to uncover. There's so many families out there that haven't told their story, and we want to learn from them. We want to know what our people struggled like back then. Emerging Stories is about exploring the less documented places and memories that come from you, the community. Every memory, photo, and story helps us see the full picture of our Latinx and Chicano community within Boulder County. Our main focuses are stories through 1999 to honor multiple generations. Why? Because those years hold the memories of parents, grandparents, and community members who shaped the county we know today. And we encourage you to tell your story, share your photos, family stories in those places that shape you today. Next, I will give you a peek into the kind of research that the student research assistants are doing by sharing some of their findings, of the findings of one of our students. So one of our research or student researchers, Marlena Nava-Chorn, is involved in this project and she couldn't be here today. She is taking her last finals before graduating. It's an honor for me to be presenting her findings so you have a more concrete idea of what our students have been doing. Marlena's research is focused on Pleasant View Ridge School, which is located in Longmont, northwest corner of Oxford Road and East County Line Road. This site was chosen for investigations as there were various claims that it was the first integrated school in Colorado. To see if this claim could be true, she visited the Carnegie Library in Boulder and looked through the census records for Pleasant View's Ridge School from 1899 to 1951. Here's what she discovered so far. The school opened in 1899, and from that point until 1922, the census data shows that enrollment was composed exclusively of students of white and European heritage. During this time, the class size was about 25 students. However, in 1923 was the first year with recorded attendance of students with Latinx Chicano heritage. My focus is on the evolving demographics from this point until the school closed. Some general facts Marlena has discovered so far is that in the years 1923 to 1930, Latinx and Chicano students made up between 11 to 17% of the school's population. There was also a clear standout year in 1927 where the presence of Latinx and Chicano students peaked at an outstanding 28% of the student body. At the end of this period in 1930, it's marked by the addition of a second room to the school, which likely led to a shift in overall attendance and population dynamics. The next period, 1931 to 1943, shows an average of 43% of the students were of Mexican Spanish descent. On average, the total class size was 41 students, with 17 to 18 of those being Latinx Chicano students. The peak year for Latinx and Chicano attendance was in 1934, where more than half the students, specifically 25 out of the 42 kids, were of Mexican and Latin descent. Marlena also tracked a couple of Chicano families, such as the Najera family and the Cordero family, who both had a large presence at the school. Moving forward, she's hoping to focus on analyzing differences in students' age profiles and tracking the educational longevity of these specific families over the time to better understand their lived experience during this era. And next, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Josie. It was really great hearing that history. And now I'd like to sort of talk a little bit more about history, specifically Las Barracas, which is located just outside of Longmont, just east of Costco on 119. And so what are these barracks? You may have seen them if you're driving down 119. So they're actually a military-style structure that arrived after World War II and was moved by the Tanaka family farm outside of Longmont to where it is now. So the Tanakas were a long-established Japanese-American family, farming family, who had began building their successful agricultural operation about 1910, 1915. So they persevered through decades of anti Asian prejudice and legal barriers that sought to limit their rights and land access. So, on that same land, as they started to grow their vegetable farming operation, they realized that they needed more workers. And so they hired a lot of seasonal Mexican American migrants. And Las Barracas became housing for those Mexican and Chicano agricultural workers. These families harvested the food that sustained Boulder County, yet lived in overcrowded and substandard conditions. Um, in 1988, it came to a head where a federal lawsuit was filed specifically against the Tanakas for the living conditions in places like the barracks. So it was brought to national attention the injustices that were happening right here, just outside of Longmont, challenging the idea that the people who fed this region could be treated as temporary, disposable, or invisible. So by the 1990s, uh, folks were actually evicted from the barracks and they were no longer used as housing. And today, this structure is one of the few remaining physical reminders of Latino labor history in Boulder County. It stands as a testament to generations who endured discrimination while building community, protecting culture, and shaping the land with their hands. So Las Barracas asks us to remember those families, their work, their joy, their presence, and to ensure that their stories that have once been pushed away are lifted up and preserved for future generations. So now I'd like to talk about how you can get involved. You've heard a little bit about what this project is. You've heard a little bit about how each of us is connected to this work. And now we'd love to share how you can get involved. And because we would love for you and your family, your friends, and for you to encourage others to be involved in this process, because that's how Community Project works. First, you can join the Community Advisory Board. This is going to be a group helping connect the team with families, organizations, community networks. Meetings will likely be monthly with hybrid options. You could also, if that feels like too much, you could complete a storytelling survey. Maybe you have a story of how your family lived and worked in Boulder County, and you want to share it with us. And so you can complete a survey as well, and we'll share that with you in a few slides. You can also share your family story through photos or personal artifacts. Our team can help with digitization to make sure that we're not keeping your photos, but we're able to digitize them so other people can see them. You can also participate in an oral history interview, which can be conducted in English, Spanish, or both. Interviews can also include multiple family members, and you can share the history of your family in Boulder County. And then lastly, maybe you can help us host or convene a community focus group, such as groups connected to specific neighborhoods, workplaces, or rural areas. Maybe you know folks that worked at Las Barracas, and you have friends that would like to come together and sort of share stories about what that experience was like. And so we would love to work with you to help create that, make that convening come to life. And now I'll pass it to Becky for our question and answer session.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And then we had a time where apparently I can't speak today. That's being recorded. I know. We had an opportunity for folks to ask any questions that they had about the project or even share some of their insights that came to them during the presentation. And some of the questions included, how will my story be protected? Participants can choose to be anonymous. Materials will be housed within Rooted Pathways leadership for now. And we will figure out where the best place is to put those based on feedback from the community. Contributors will help to decide how their stories, documents, and interviews are used. Do we keep them private? Are we going to be able to share them with archives like at History Colorado or the Carnegie Library or both? Or a place that's local like the Longmont Archive? Or will they only be used within the project? Before the final report or any presentations, the team will also return to the community and get feedback to make sure that the stories are captured accurately and that we are sharing out and honoring those stories the way that they wanted them to be. Another question was, how long will you be working on it? And are there any plans yet on how the results will be shared at the larger project? Funding currently carries this project through June, and phase 2 begins in January and focuses on oral histories, focus groups, community memory gathering, And a draft of the findings is due by June, the end of June, and there will be presentations in multiple community spaces. And how the history is shared publicly will be guided by community desires. Will they be murals, interpretive panels, public exhibits, things that are actually possible and fit within the confines of what we're able to do or what the county is able to do. And we don't have an exact timeline because this project is guided by you. The feedback is guided by you. What becomes of these stories is guided by you, the community. Another question was, how much time do I need to commit if I want to be a connector? As Elizabeth said earlier, about one meeting per month with additional involvement based on your personal interest. So you may be someone who the meeting is all that you want to do, but you also might want to be able to go out and help with some of our community events, or even help potentially with some of the oral history. So that level of involvement really depends on what you want to do. And some of the things are providing guidance on outreach strategies, identifying potential sites and folks to interview, reviewing and giving us feedback on draft materials, connecting project staff with broader networks, advocating for accessibility and ensuring the project addresses barriers, and support the transparency of the project by sharing updates that we give to the community and your networks. And are we doing oral histories in Spanish too? Yes. We have several team members and student research assistants who are bilingual, and we will do oral histories in pairs. So likely somebody on that team will be bilingual and be able to do the oral histories in English, Spanish, or both. And then we also had time to ask our participants some questions. And one of them was, what racial or ethnic group do you identify with? And as you could see by the larger, as more people identified or use the word is bigger. And so you could see Mexican and Latina are the ones that stand out the most with the group that participated. And a lot of that comes from the migration that happened and folks coming up here to work and to reconnect with family. We had Mexican American, multiracial ethnic identities, Puerto Rican, German, Chicana, Mexicana, Spanish, Latinx. So we have a diversity of how folks self-identify themselves, and we wanted to get that input so that we can also utilize that in how it shapes the words that we use and how we reflect on things within our community. One of the participants also shared a statement saying, it's really hard for me to answer that question. I know where I come from, but I've always been told by those around me that I was too white to be Hispanic and I was too brown to be white. So it's hard for them to answer this question. And that is something, especially growing up in Northern Colorado, and I myself have faced for me for close to almost half a century, of really figuring out where I belong. And it's a continuous process too. The next question we asked was, which Latin and Chicano stories have been missing from Boulder County history, and what stories would make that history more complete? And some of them have mentioned, again, Las Barracas, mining, the turkey plant, technology and industry. Where does that fall into? Carnicerias and panaderias. Where did people get the food that they eat and celebrated with? Looking at how community members supported one another and systems of mutual aid. Looking at how folks get their health care and looking at that. Looking at the sundown laws that separated folks and maintained segregation with no Mexicans and no dog signs in the windows, and separate seating in movie theaters where Mexican Americans sat up top in the balcony and whites sat at the bottom. So looking at those racist things that happened back in history, and also looking at the railroad work that happened, the traqueros, which I actually often forget about, and I shouldn't because my grandfather worked on the railroad. So there's a lot of really great things for us to still uncover with this project. And then another question we had was, what advice do you have for us as we move deeper into the engagement to make sure that we are being transparent and intentional with the work that we're doing? And some of it was bring food. Food always brings people together. Having music. Don't forget the Chicano movement and the political environment. Making sure events are in accessible places and at times for people to be able to fit it into their schedules. Um, and looking at the elders in our community and capturing those stories and engaging with local leaders and associated boards. In honoring the history as tools for surviving oppression and looking at the business community as well. And now to Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Becky. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about our new website. This is a place that you can come to at any time to find updated information on what we've been doing, including what events are coming up. So if we'll be doing any type of events like the Museum of Memory, for example, which would be an event where we would ask folks to come together and we would bring objects that might elicit memories. So we could potentially bring sugar beets. We could bring different objects that could help you remember or your family remember what histories you have associated with Boulder County. And so any events like that would be posted here, updates as well, and likely a link to this video as well. So if you would like to see it in Spanish, you can also do that by going to the top right corner of the website, and there is a language option where you can put it in Spanish as well. So we ask that you reach out at any time if you have any questions. There's also contact information here. Am I still speaking?
Yeah, I was unmuting. Oh no, it's me. And then also just to wrap up this, we will send any follow-up emails to whoever attended the event and anybody who fills out the evaluation form and provides their contact information. The email will include links and information moving forward, including the links to this recording. And then watch social media for updates. I have my Rooted Pathways places on Facebook and LinkedIn. And then Parks and Open Spaces has been a really great partner in this because it is a part of who is funding this project. But they also often share the social media posts. So like Rooted Pathways Leadership, like Parks and Open Space, and keep a tab on what we're doing. And then also the QR code that you see there will take you to that evaluation that I mentioned to let us know how we did. And again, provide any comments or questions that you have. And then also if you want to leave your contact information, and we'll make sure you get a follow-up email regarding this presentation. And earlier this is Josie.
If you would like to let us know you're interested in the project or want to share your story, please scan the QR codes to get to the form. Please share with other people you know as well. We would love to hear from all of you and share your story. Thank you all so much for being here with us today and sharing your time, questions, and stories. Your presence truly helps us guide this work and keeps the history of our communities alive. Stay connected on the new webpage where you'll also find the information on how to reach our project team if you would like to share a story, suggest a site, or get more involved. We're grateful you're part of this journey with us. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you all for supporting us.